How do you kill your marriage? This is how I killed my marriage. And you're asking, why do you want to do that, Frank? I found that there were aspects in my marriage, in my relationship with Julie, that I had to reevaluate and reconsider and say, I don't want that as a part of my marriage. I don't want that as a part of our relationship, because it came a time when those things that was a part of our relationship started causing conflict, started to have emotional distance because of myself, these aspects of our relationship. So I want to talk about how we can do that. These things that I've learned over the course of the years that I've been married to Julie. The time of this recording has been 18 years of being married to Julie. So these are the things that I've learned and the things I had to kill from my marriage. In fact, I use that word acronym, the word kill, K.I.L.L, to help me and hopefully help you, as I've helped a lot of other couples in identifying those things in the relationship that has caused hurt and injury and damage in the relationship. It says these are the areas in our marriage that we need to kill. So the first thing in the acronym K.I.L.L is, number one, is to know yourself, to know who you are. This is talking about self-awareness. This is talking about having to know your mindset, knowing your attitude, knowing those things that impact your wife, those behaviors, maybe those words, maybe that mindset, whatever it may be. It's about knowing yourself or what you do that impacts your wife in a negative way. One of the things I recognized when I was married earlier on, when we were married earlier on, I had started taking this coaching course to help me become a better pastor and helping other couples and other people and such. And I started using that strategy with my wife. And if you know anything about coaching, you don't necessarily share a lot of answers, you ask a lot of questions. And I started using that with my wife, and she got so irritated. She would hesitate talking to me. She would hesitate having to have conversation and dialogues with me because I would apply these coaching strategies with her, and sooner or later she began to feel insecure. She started to feel distant, and we just began to lack that intimacy between the two of us. And I had to understand and recognize that that was something that I was doing that impacted the relationship. How about you? What are the things that you need to become aware of and says, you know what, these are stuff that I do, I say, I behave that impacts the relationship. So know yourself, know the things about you before pointing the finger about her. The second thing after knowing yourself is to identify those negative, harmful patterns. Identify those harmful patterns. And what I mean by that is things such as, when she does something, what do you do? This is something that, as a therapist, this is one of the things that we do. For me, being trained in emotion-focused therapy, one of the things that I begin to realize is I ask couples, like, when your husband says that, wife, what do you do? And wife, when you do that, husband, what do you do? And so we just track this negative pattern. And we call it patterns because essentially that's what they are. There are things that are patterns that we do as a couple that kicks up this negative conflict, this negative pattern between husband and wife. And so when we can begin to identify the negative pattern that happens between the two of you, you begin to recognize, you know what, here we're doing that thing again, we're doing that negative cycle again. And so it's important for us to recognize, hey, when I do this, when I say this, when I have this look on my face, when my volume goes up, when I start saying more pointed words, when I start cussing, and when my hands start flailing, whatever it is, you guys know what those negative cycles are, because you get caught up in it, and in your mind you think to yourself, here we go again. It's important to identify those harmful patterns and harmful cycles that you and your wife get into. Because the reason why this is so important is when you recognize that negative cycle, it's important to know what it is and then what we can do differently. Knowing what is the pattern between you and your wife and what can be done differently, so that way this negative pattern, this negative cycle doesn't get kicked up again. So when that negative cycle is beginning to When you becoming a customer, identifying what that negative cycle is, and you identify the harmful patterns between the two of you, the third thing is to learn new strategies. To learn new strategies, doing whatever it takes to learn what can we do to do this better. Maybe it's having to go to a conference. Maybe it's having to read books. Maybe it's going to listen to some podcasts, taking notes and all these learnings. And you and your wife are having to take notes and talking about how can we apply this to our marriage? How can we apply this in our relationship? What can we do to prevent this negative pattern from being kicked up between the two of us? If we get caught up in this negative cycle where we start this argument and we have this emotional distance. That's exactly what I had to do between Julia and I. We went to marriage conferences. We did a marriage retreat. We traveled across the nation to another place to just have this dialogue between her and I to just draw closer. We did whatever it took. And you're saying, that costs money, Frank. Hey, it does cost money. You need to invest into your relationship just as much as you invest in that expensive shoes, that expensive car, that expensive hotel vacation, or whatever it is, that vacation that you guys took. Those things are important, but what's more important is investing financially into your relationship, so that way the purpose is you can draw closer to each other. Right? Know yourself, identify harmful patterns, learn new strategies. The fourth thing is let go of ego. Let go of your ego. This is speaking into having to understand that I don't know it all. I had to realize, even though I am the man in this relationship and she's my wife, I need to recognize that God has blessed her to me as a helper. In the Bible, it talks about Adam and Eve, and the Bible says that Adam was given Eve to be his helper, to help each other. I liken it to like a car. In the vehicle, when you're driving a vehicle, there's there's rear view mirrors to why? To point out the blind sides for the driver to see. You know, my wife, and your wife, was God gave you that wife, gave you her because she was to point out the blind sides, to bring up the things that you weren't seeing, the perspectives that you weren't seeing, so to bring humility into your life. I'm a believer of recognizing that, hey, the wife is there to keep me humble, to keep me grounded, to recognize that I'm not all hot stuff, to think I'm all the best things in sliced bread. You know what I'm saying? But God blessed me with my wife. And when I began to look at all the things in my life that Julie has done for me, had I not have her in my life today, I would be a complete mess. But God knew who to put into my life so that I could be able to operate as a man, to do what I'm called to do as a therapist, and do all these things. And so I needed to let go of my ego so that way I could be able to say, you know what? I don't have this all figured out. I don't know it all. I need my wife to speak into this. And when I began to start allowing her to speak into my life, speak into the things that I didn't see, and I needed her to point out the blind sides in my heart, the blind sides in my perspective, the blind spots in my perspective, when I began to do that and allow her to speak into that, my strength as a man, my boldness, my courageous, my ability to lead and be a visionary for a family went to the next level. And I would encourage you to know yourself. I would encourage you to identify the harmful patterns, to learn the new strategies that you need to learn to kill those old behaviors, and to let go of ego and to welcome that humility. It's what helps you to kill those aspects of your marriage that is destroying you. And if you're here and you're saying, well, we get caught up in this argument, we keep on fighting and fighting and fighting, how do we end this? Well, stay tuned. This next video I want to talk about is how you can stop fighting in your relationship. That's it hurting the both of you. If that's something that you want to learn more about, stay tuned for the next video.